This is Everyday Discipleship, a podcast whose mission is to equip Christians to live for the glory of Christ from a biblical worldview. My name is Chad Lee, and with me is Cole Chenal, and we are two pastors at Reformation Baptist Church in Northwest Arkansas. And today we're going to be discussing classical Christian education. And we have a guest with us today, Mr. Lance Harris, who is the headmaster at Wisdom and Truth Classical Academy, a school that our church partners with, and I have the privilege to be on the board of, and we are now in our fourth year.
Fourth year?
Yeah, at Wisdom and Truth. So Lance,
what grades you go up to?
Well, right now we're through 6, K through 6 right now.
K through 6.
Yeah. Lance, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Well, I appreciate you having me on.
Yes,
it's a great pleasure.
It's honestly been something we wanted to do for a while. It's just a matter of, now that the school year is over, there's a little bit more flexibility, at least for a little bit. So I guess to start this off today, if you could maybe give us just kind of like a brief overview of your experience in the classical Christian world, would that be all right?
Sure.
Yeah, like how'd you get into it? Like where'd you start?
Sure. So grew up in Northeast Arkansas in the cotton fields of the Delta. Met my wife at Southern Baptist College in Walnut Ridge, which is now Williams University. And then after our sophomore year, followed her to John Brown, having never heard of John Brown University before. I asked her where she was going. She said John Brown. I said, oh, me too.
There we go. And you have a music degree from there, right?
I do. I have a choral music degree from JBU. Traveled from there back to Northeast Arkansas, where I taught choral music in a high school for 12 years. Over the course of those 12 years, God blessed us with 5 children, and as we began to look at how we wanted to educate those children, we decided to homeschool. And in 1995, I had a pastor come into our church and handed me a book by Doug Wilson called Recovering the Lost Tools of Learning. And all of a sudden, everything that was going on in the public school that I was teaching in, Doug's book all of a sudden made sense of everything that was going on.
It's a dangerous book to read.
It is.
What year was this?
95.
So you're talking 95 in what, big town, small town?
Little bitty town.
And so you're noticing problems in public school in a little bitty town?
Oh, yes. So as Doug points out the philosophy, I began to realize, that's why that doesn't work. This would work if we did that, but we're not going to do that. So I don't really see any remedy for some of these things. So we were homeschooling our children, and all of a sudden the vision of classical Christian education popped in front of my eyes through the book. And at that point, we began to see how we could educate our children that way. The Lord allowed me to take over a small Abeka school at the church that we were attending at the time. And from there, he moved us to Louisville to take over a school, and do church music at the same church.
Was that a classical Christian school?
It was. And we spent 18 years there, took our kids through that program, and then the Lord moved us back here. So I've been involved in classical education formally in a school setting since 2000. So for 26 years.
Yeah, 26 years. Yeah, when I read Recovering the Lost Tools of Learning, I guess now it's been probably 5 years ago, but then coupled with the more recent Battle for the American Mind with Pete Hegseth and Goodwin, I think he's still the president of ACCS, isn't he?
Yes. Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth.
Yes, Secretary of War. Like your mind, it just kind of, it makes sense, honestly, when you, in light of the public education system, where it used to be, where it is now, and all those values that we're going to get into today. So
maybe that's a good place to start. So, because I'm the ignorant one, that my son goes to Wisdom and Truth, right? But I believe in it. I see the value of it. I see it every day with him. But I get to be kind of the person that's like, I know nothing, so explain this to me. So, broad overview, I know it's a hard thing to do. It's a huge movement. I think what you're going to talk about, it goes back into the history of Western civilization. And so understanding all that, broad overview, like what is classical Christian education? Obviously, that's the Christian part. It's like, what's classical education?
All right, so I'm going to quote one of my favorite professors, not that I've had him, but Dr. Anthony Esselin, who teaches at Thales College in North Carolina. He was asked this question on a panel, and his answer was simply, It's what education was before John Dewey messed it up.
Yeah.
So, classical Christian education is the nourishment of the souls of our students to produce wisdom and virtue in them by using the 7 liberal arts, so that when these children are grown, they're better able to love and serve God in whatever He calls them to do.
Okay.
So that's my elevator speech for it.
Yeah, like the big, broad. So then I guess my question would be, what difference, because especially like growing up, so we're in North Arkansas. I grew up here my whole life. And I think most people, like the millennial generation that's now having kids and getting them in education, most of us grew up going to public school because we're in that area where Bible Belt Christianity, when I was growing up, public school is generally safe, right? I had teachers that, like I remember science class, 6th, 7th grade, they would teach evolution as one of the theories of creation, but creation was taught alongside of it. I had teachers that were actively Christian and would say it. And so I think a lot of people think, well, I got educated in public school and I did fine, right? But what is the difference between maybe how some of us have experienced education, which is like just textbooks and note-taking and stuff like that, versus what you're doing at Wisdom and Truth?
Sure. So I think the main distinction between what I'll call modern education and classical education is the classical education starts from a point of viewing, as Colossians says, that Christ, in Him all things consist. So everything that exists in this creation in some way points to God, is symbolic of God. And when we begin to realize that, we don't want to fragment the creation into distinct parts that have nothing to do with one another. What we want to present is a unified vision of reality that points, that everything in every subject points back to the Logos, to the Christocentric nature of the creation. Modern education tends to, its basic philosophy is to pull everything apart, to pull it into its parts to see what it's made of, which is what a materialistic worldview is going to lead to anyway. Because you have to see what the parts, what something is made of in order to understand what it is. I think that's a wrong assumption from modernistic education. What we want to do is we want to present reality to our kids so that they can understand, first and foremost, who God is, second, who they are in that economy, and then delight in doing the 2 things that humans do, the humanities. One of those is literature, and one of those is numbers. Humans are the only ones that do those things. So what we want to do is present both the literary world leading back to the Scriptures, founded upon the Scriptures, and the world of quantity, the world of number. We want our students to understand those, to love those, to be able to use those as they need to throughout the rest of their lives. So first and foremost, we want to point them through a classical education back to the Logos, back to the centrality of everything in creation.
Yeah, and you say this is the foundation, definitely a distinctive, is that the foundation of it is God is creator, and we are made in His image.
Yes.
And then this stems from how we actually do that, right? Practically day to day in a classical Christian school. That's the foundation. And then you get into the 7 liberal arts, and then obviously the grammar, logic, rhetoric, like distinctive to the classical model, and how we're actually forming the wisdom and the virtue in these students. Is that fair?
Sure.
To kind of summarize that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Andrew Kern, the founder of the Circe Institute, for whom I have great respect, he defines grammar as the harmony of an idea. So, for instance, if you're in the woods, there's a deer, and you name that thing as a deer, there's harmonization there. If you see a deer and your son's out hunting with you and you say, "Oh, look, a turkey," there's a disharmony there, things that's not part of reality, right? Logic then is the harmonization of those ideas together to look at the creation and study it. And he defines rhetoric as the harmonization of a community. So what we need to be able to do as ambassadors for Christ here on earth is we need to be able to understand the problems that we have in a community and be educated enough to be wise enough to be able to explain and to persuade people what the truth is so that that community can live in harmony to the best of its potential.
So in a sense, talking about the rhetoric. Like grammar, would you say, just to, again, dumb it down here, being able to name the thing, logic, what the thing does, rhetoric, being able to defend and explain why the thing does what it does?
I might tweak that. Grammar, to name the thing as Adam did. Logic, to tell what things are, to be able to rightly describe things, to rightly deduce or induce, depending on which method you're using, to rightly understand the essence of that thing and what it truly is.
Okay. So I hope I don't show my ignorance here and totally get this wrong. So from what I understand, from what you, kind of everything you just said, is that the distinction between classical Christian education versus, say, modern education is that there is a philosophical emphasis of Christ over it all. Like that's like Chad said, the foundation.
Right.
That obviously with like secular schools, they're not doing Christ overall. But so the education of a classical Christian school is doing Christ overall. And then the difference between that and, say, just like a Christian education, say like a public school light that is a part of a church, mm-hmm. is going to be that, I guess, the outcomes of learning, in the sense that if modern education is dissecting the parts and separating the parts and looking at each individual part, a classical Christian model is going to help students almost become, like through that method of grammar, logic, rhetoric, of naming the thing, of being able to identify how the thing works, and then how'd you say it for rhetoric?
For the harmonization of a community.
Okay, so for that, then it's essentially going to make students masters or Renaissance men almost of those things. Would that be a way to say it?
That would be one
way
to
say
it.
Where it's like, as public education, you might know how to do math and
mm-hmm.
might know some facts and do all that stuff, but that with a classical Christian education, you're going to come out essentially a thinker. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right.
Like a thinker that takes a cohesive whole and is able to put the pieces together mm-hmm. to be a fully formed, well-formed, critical thinker.
Right. You will hear people in this movement describe things as modern education focuses on specialization, but classical education focuses on generalization. So there's a breadth of knowledge there rather than only being focused on one particular skill or skill set. So, yeah.
I think you've used the word, to me, utilitarian.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of the education now is
mm-hmm.
just be able to code data.
Yeah.
But then when COVID comes and we forget that a mask doesn't actually work, we kind of get hijacked because we don't know how to think critically.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair? Is that a fair thing to say? That like that's the thing I'm kind of getting out of, is that because I totally see, as someone that's been through public school or just like a generic education, you're going to be able to know stuff, but you're not a thinker. Is that really the difference?
Well, we hope that is one of the advantages of a classical education, is to produce thinkers.
Have you seen that in your 25 years? Have you seen the fruit of?
Yes, we have. We had few graduates at the school in Louisville, but they have turned out to be tremendous young people. And we have usually hit a point with everyone around 10th or 11th grade as they hang out with their peers. At some point, they all look at their teacher and say, "You're making us weird."
But weird in a good way.
Weird in a good way, yes. What we want to produce are kids, are young men and women who who can think broadly about a number of things, who are not just restricted. One of the issues of current modern education is the goal is for the student to figure out what he or she wishes to do with their life and to track them into that so that they can be productive, get a good job, and help the economy, make their living. In a classical education, that comes along with being very well read, to have an understanding of the creation, which brings us, we've been talking about grammar, logic, and rhetoric, the Trivium. The other 4 liberal arts are mathematical arts, the Quadrivium. Everything about creation is measurable in number, which has led a lot of modern scholarship into an understanding that, then the only thing that matters is what can be numbered. So the Quadrivium, understanding the mathematical nature of creation, as we study arithmetic and geometry and music and astronomy, those 4 things make up the Quadrivium. But to give those students that we graduate an understanding of the quantitative nature of the world as well will serve them well as they go out and really allow them to do whatever they'd like to do.
So that's a good example. So like you said, one of those things. So when you talk about the 7 classical arts or liberal arts, you're talking about the Trivium and Quadrivium, right? And so one of the things you said in the Quadrivium was like astronomy. So explain, because I don't know. I mean, what is that? Why is that part of the education? Like that's a good example of like, I think 'cause some people look at classical education and maybe it's a question we can ask too, but like, why do we do Latin? No one reads Latin. Astronomy. I mean, I've never, like, you got to know the planets and the order of the planets, I guess. But like, why do astronomy at all? Like, what benefit is that doing? What are you doing actually in that?
Sure. So the medievals would tell you that you don't study astronomy so that you understand the mathematical nature of the way that the planets move. Studying number, studying arithmetic, which is discrete number in and of itself. Studying geometry is number in space. Studying music is number in time. Studying astronomy is number in space and time.
So is that like physics? Is that what you're doing?
Physics is part of it.
Okay, so it's not astronomy. I thought you're astronomy, and I think of just constellations.
Well, but the medievals would say those 4 abstract studies, the purpose of them is not utilitarian. The purpose of those 4 abstract studies are to make you come to a realization of God himself, at the wonder that you see in the created order, which is mathematical. I believe Johannes Kepler even said that God spoke the world into existence, and the language that he used was numbers. So the purpose, as the medievals would have stated it, for studying the Quadrivium was to bring you into an understanding and awe and wonder at the Creator himself. So
yeah, so like for the layman person out there, then so you're doing all the numbers, but the numbers are not just into themselves so that you can do Pythagorean theorem, right, but actually doing the numbers and seeing God over the numbers. That's like really kind of the difference.
Sure. Did y'all ever in algebra class ask your teacher, why do I have to do this?
Every
use
day.
This.
I was a terror.
Well, but see, you still use it every day. You might not use the algebraic formulae, but you learned how to reason through algebra, and now you're reasoning every single day.
Well, I think that's like one of the, and that's what I've always said, like with my sons, where, because before the school started, me and Jessica talked about what we're going to do for education. And I said, at the end of the day, I don't think it really matters because all you need to know is how to think. If you can critically think, you can do anything. And I think that's like what I saw in my public education was with all these students that I was with, like millions and millions of dollars being spent on, I could do formulas, but you have a bunch of people that just like, they can get through on grades, but they don't really know how to think, interact with the world, or do anything productive with it. And so
I think that's the part, if I could interrupt, the part that's kind of shook me as I was, reading through all this stuff and we were having conversations about a school is I just grew up, school is so you can get a job.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's not like this wisdom, virtue, in relation to God. It's that you got to be able to pay the mortgage. Mm-hmm. And so that's what kind of really, I guess, grew my passion for this, was realizing that, I mean, when this goes back how far?
Which part goes back?
Just the classical model.
Oh. Well, there's a reiteration of it about every 250 years.
Yeah.
It pops its head back up because we forget, just like Psalm 78. You know, we're told to remember, but we don't.
So when you say we forget, what is it that we're forgetting? Is that we forget that God is over everything, or is it forgetting the actual method of this education?
Yeah, probably they go hand in hand. Both happen at the same time.
Okay.
So ask me your question again.
No, I interrupted you.
No, it's fine.
Because I was just this understanding of like what public education has become.
Oh.
Versus this whole different model, and I mean, there's so many differences, but foundationally, it's like, what is the actual purpose here?
Right. And as you delve back into history, one of the things that shocked me was to find, I'm sure you've heard of Cotton Mather.
Yeah.
Yes.
With the Puritan. Went to Harvard, I believe, when he was 16, maybe 15.
Like all the founding fathers, like 24s.
Right.
23.
Our view of education today is incredibly different than education has been throughout history. When John Dewey investigated the Prussian method of education.
Yeah, you said John Dewey. Who's John Dewey?
John Dewey was a philosopher and an educator. He had some great things, but one of the things that he helped import into the U.S. was a system of education that Prussia came up with to rescue their economy. Prior to that, if you look at like we took the school to a one-room schoolhouse over Rocky Branch earlier this year, and the kids were shocked to find out that, these children only went to school through the 8th grade. But the education that they received up through those 8th grades was tremendous compared to what an 8th grader would learn today. And then if there were students who went from 8th grade to teaching or into university, which is not something that this system is built to do. This system is built for a 12-year degree. You have to go through the 12 years, which points back to a tremendously different understanding of what education means. What are you supposed to do? Right now, we need those 12 years to prepare everything we need to go to university, to go to college in order to get a good job. Historically, it meant to be inundated, immersed in the literature of your culture so that you understood all the best thoughts that had ever been thought and written down within your culture. And to be able to bring any of those things to bear on any given situation at any given time. To be able to imitate, not just for the sake of imitation, but to be able to imitate the thoughts, the thought patterns, the speech patterns of various authors. Early Athenian Greek history, their education was built around Greek literature and Greek poetry, which most of their literature was poetry, epic poetry like the Odyssey and the Iliad. So these students were expected to remember, to fill their mind with the great words of the people that had come before them, to stand on the shoulders of their giants, and then be able to use the wisdom in that literature that they had ingested and be able to use that in their lives.
So how did Dewey, because when I read the Battle for the American Mind, like the founders had, according to their research, like the classical Christian model is what education was. Mm-hmm. And then early 20th century, right? It was early 1900s?
Late 19th century.
Okay. So what was his not to give it all away, but his progressive ploy.
I haven't read enough of Dewey to know that. Just that he investigated this system in Prussia, brought the idea over. I believe John Rockefeller he convinced to help fund it, to get it implemented. And that's where what we now, when someone says the word school, the image that pops into our mind today, that's a result of Dewey and Rockefeller.
So you're saying like Dewey to save the economy, so I'm guessing is more utilitarian influence?
Yeah.
And producing basically drones that could work.
There's a book out there by a New York State Teacher of the Year named John Taylor Gatto. After he won State Teacher of the Year for the third time, I believe he was a high school history teacher. He quit. And he wrote a book called The Underground History of American Education that lays all of this out. He could not stay in the system anymore because he understood how it was dehumanizing to the people that were in it. Because no longer were students part of a community, of a family. They were now numbers in a classroom. I believe, I may be misremembering this, but his contention was that the Prussian system intentionally pulled students into a centralized location, factory-type location, and divided them from their siblings by grades, and in order to be able to have the influence on them that they needed. So,
well, I mean, we would say it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, the general American public now, I mean, the reading levels, I forgot what stat I was looking at.
It's like less than 8th grade.
Yeah, it's not good. But then also the morals and the ethics we see around us now, right? When you are taught 40 hours a week for 12 years, at least, that you're just a byproduct of evolutionary processes. You can't have meaning. You don't have meaning.
And that's a big part. I mean, is there meaning in anything anymore? Does the universe itself have meaning? Does the creation that God put us in have meaning? Do we see any meaning in that? Well, if we don't, then we get to make up our own meaning.
Well, and too, like the whole idea of postmodern thought of no ultimate truth, no culture better than others, that you honestly can't exalt one virtue over the other, because who's to say what virtues are actually the virtues and which ones are actually the vices?
Yeah.
And so, you said something though that, because the idea was getting at, it's like classical education is trying to develop thinkers. I think you said something that was maybe the best thing that I've gotten out, we'll probably get out of this whole thing today, is that because of classical education, you get this breadth of what's come before, and you get the best thoughts of that Western civilization has produced, and that you can bring those best thoughts that Western civilization has produced to bear on your life, on the problems of the world, and things like that. And why I thought that was so helpful was because I talk all the time about how you build on the foundation that came before. Like when I talk about our church, right, most of us in our church, we're Reformed church, right, Calvinistic in our theology. Most of us became Calvinistic later, like high school, college, after that. And I always tell like guys, like, what's it going to look like when our children, we have 150 plus kids here, they're raised with that Calvinistic, Reformed, glory of God alone understanding. What are they going to look like after us? Because they're not building the foundation from scratch. They're building on top of the foundation we built. Right. And so tying that back into the education piece, because I look at our civilization right now, like crumbling around us. It's all coming down. And I've been reading the book you turned me on to, the Constitution and like founding documents and stuff. And to read what these guys wrote and how they thought, I told my wife, I said, if people knew this is what our founders thought, we would not be in the situation we're in. And I said, we can't do this today. Like we cannot, there's not people that can think like this today or lead like this today, because they were standing on the shoulders of giants that came before them. Right. And so all that to say is, like, one of the benefits I'm seeing of classical education in taking the best thoughts of Western civilization and being able to bring them to bear is, right now, our civilization is crumbing down. And as it is today, someone would have to literally restart building the foundations without this. Whereas if you have classical education, you can bring those best thoughts to bear and start building on a foundation that's already been laid to fix all this. I mean, that's like one of the things I think of that, talking about like grand picture vision of classical education in the world, is Western civilization's falling apart, the answer is already there. It's just that we don't know what it is.
Right.
And we haven't been taught what it is.
So this brings up one of the other aspects of classical education we haven't talked about, is the idea of piety. Now, as we come face to face with reality, one of the things that we as human beings need to understand, which is very difficult in this current culture, because we are so atomized, we are so individualistic. Piety speaks to, as the ancients believed, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, piety was a huge part of the educational system, because there is a duty that we owe to our family, there's a duty that we owe to our nation, and there's a duty that we owe to our God.
So when you're saying piety, though, because like Greeks and Romans are polytheists, so they're not talking about Christian piety, but they're talking about just some idea of religion and virtue tied together.
Yeah, and this is one of the arguments, one of the example arguments that Lewis used in The Abolition of Man. In when is it right to go to war? Ought you to be willing to go to war for the defense of those you love? Well, we have a duty to our nation because God has placed us within a particular culture in a particular time. We have a duty to our family because he's obviously put us into a particular family. And because of those things, we have a duty to him because he's the one that owns our lives anyway. So what we've done is we've jettisoned that piety and we've forgotten all the blessings and all the gifts that we've been given to be where we are. And that's why, as you put it, our culture appears to be crumbling around us because we've been ungrateful. We have not been thankful for what God has put here before us to bring us to this place. It's very difficult at times to step outside of our time and contemplate how blessed we actually are here, in every single way. We don't have to spend all of our days hunting for our food just to survive. We don't have to spend hours, 12, 16 hours a day in the field just to make sure we have food for the winter. God has blessed us so tremendously, and we just forget those things. We've cut ourselves off from our past, and a regaining of that piety, a regaining of that understanding that God has placed us in this reality, and our job is to recognize that and to harmonize ourselves with that reality rather than proclaim that we're going to be who we're going to be no matter what God says about anything. So,
well, I mean, and that's in stark contrast to what the public school and the higher education systems have taught the generations, my generation, Gen Z behind us, that you're all racist, you're on stolen land, you shouldn't be proud of the founding. And a lot of people have bought the lie because they haven't actually been taught how to, going back to your point earlier, like think critically and appreciate our fathers and respect them. I think
it's like one of the things that, it makes sense then why that, I don't know, I think you call it matins in the morning, where like that every day starts and ends at school with you have basically recitations of, I think Psalm 100 is one of them, or a derivation of Psalm 100, and doxology, the Gloria Patri, singing a hymn,
the Lord's Prayer,
Proverbs, wisdom from Proverbs. Like, it makes sense now that that's not just something we're doing because we're a Christian school, but it's actually something we're doing that's kind of starting and ending a day like that is what you're talking about, is that piety that God's over all of it and God's in all of it, through all of it. And so it's not, I think it's like if you just came to it, you think, oh, well, they do this because it's a Christian school, instead of actually, that being foundational to the education as well, because it's teaching the children like God is first and this is all for him.
We were created to worship.
Yes. Former pastor of mine said that we have made a mistake in science when we have named man as Homo sapien, wise man. We should have been called Homo adorans, made to worship.
I like that. That's good. But that speaks to the piety piece that I was going to ask you. So daily, what do you do at the school to reinforce that? And Cole kind of hit on those things.
So we do have a structure throughout the day. We have a matins service first thing in the morning where we meet and we pray together. We do responsively read a proverb or part of a proverb. And we do that for 2 weeks because I want the wisdom of that scripture to soak into their hearts over those 2 weeks. And then we sing a hymn or a psalm for 2 weeks as well. Being a musician, a choral musician, I have some very particular views on music and on the mathematical nature of harmony and what it does to our souls and for our souls. So we sing hymns for that reason. We sing them because of the poetry that they have. We sing them because of the riches of theology that they impart. And then we also sing, periodically we'll sing a psalm from God's songbook. We do that first thing just to orient ourselves to Him for the day. At lunch we have a prayer that we say together, and we sing the doxology for that. At the end of the day, we close the day with a prayer, asking God to bless the rest of our day as we leave. And we have 2 or 3 little songs that we sing there. We rotate through those.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love being there for those.
Now, on top of that, that seems to be, okay, we have to do this thing, and now let's go do the real academic work. But throughout the day, what we're doing is we are training the students. We're working with them. When they sin against one another, we want to point that out. We want to teach them to recognize when they offend, when they have sinned, when they've been offended. We want them to also be mature enough to offer forgiveness, and even more so, harder thing is to ask for forgiveness. So we're always looking out for the souls of our students because we want to help mold them as their families would want into being fit for heaven.
Okay, well, I'm going to put you on the spot here because in the mornings we do the Gloria Patri and the Lord's Prayer in English, and then also at times throughout the year in Latin. Mm-hmm. So why Latin?
Well, so Latin, early classical education was literally learning the classic languages in order to be able to read literature in Greek and in Latin.
That makes sense.
We don't really do that anymore. Most schools don't do that. Unfortunately, Latin gets a utilitarian place in the curriculum at times. It improves your vocabulary. It helps you if you're going to be a doctor. It helps improve your SAT scores, etc. But what we want our students to do, and the reason that we sometimes do the Pater Noster or the Gloria Patri in Latin, is children delight in language. They love words. Hence the popularity of Dr. Seuss. So what we want to begin to do is put that syntax, the delight in the different pronunciation, we want to put that into their ear. And that then leads to when we begin our Latin program in first grade, we do it through little bitty conversational things and little stories. And they just eat it up. They love it because it's something different, but it's a delight to their hearts. Unlike if you start Latin in college. It's not really a delight for most people.
No, it's a chore.
Oh, yeah. He's just coming home singing a song in Latin, and it's
right.
kind of rolling through my head right now.
Yeah. So we learn some songs in Latin. We ask questions and go through a graded sequence of questions, especially right now. What we've done this year is about farm animals, so they've loved that. So part of that is just to introduce them to the delight of language itself.
Well, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, because most in the response to that I get from other people, like, why Latin? We don't speak Latin anymore. And there's that word again, utilitarian. Like, well, it's not of actual tangible use that I can see, right? It's not a practical thing versus viewing it as, through the lens of what you just said. Like, language is beautiful.
Right. And it gives them a leg up as they experience that more and more through the years. Then when they do get to a more formal grammatical program for the languages, they already have a natural love for it and a bit of an understanding. What we want to get them to is the ability to understand some of it. One of those paradigm shifts throughout my career has been what's called poetic knowledge. I mentioned that earlier. Poetic knowledge is a pre-analytical sensory experience of things. Now, that's all technical jargon. If your children want a dog, if they want to know what a dog is, you go get them a dog for a pet, and they feed that dog, and they pet that dog, they groom that dog, they love that dog, right? A rather crass metaphor for modern education is your children want to know what a dog is, so you bring a dog home, you slap it on the table, you cut it up and tell them this is what a dog is. There's a story at the beginning, there's a scene at the beginning of Hard Times by Charles Dickens that sort of illustrates this. Long ago, let me shift gears here a little bit. As a choral musician, we were taught when you get in front of a choir, this is how you need to introduce a song. First of all, you need to make sure you have to spend time to make sure that your choir understands how to read music. And then you take a piece of paper with notes on it and you put it in front of them and you say, here, we're going to see if we can make this music happen. And it didn't take me very long to realize that this is really not the best way to introduce a choir to a piece of music. So what I began to do was I would listen to music and I would find a piece that I thought, this is absolutely beautiful. I want my choir to sing this. So what I would do, I wouldn't hand them a piece of paper. I'd play the song for them. Mm-hmm. Because if I can then capture their imagination to the point that they go, I want to sing this song, they will run through a wall in order to get this song perfected. Doing that with the language is the same type of thing. I want these kids to love Latin so that when it's time to study the intricacies of it, beginning, late elementary school, late grammar school, they already love it so much that they're willing to overcome the difficulties of it.
Would you say like a good metaphor between classical Christian education then and modern education is like being handed a sheet of music where you can look at the sheet of music and see the meter, see the notes, see the pitch, show my ignorance, the key, that you can analyze all those things like analytically, but then classical education is actually the hearing it.
Right. The poetic mode of this education is to put these beautiful things in front of our kids so that they fall in love with it and then they want to do it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So like, because obviously for us, I mean, our thing is government schools. You want kids out of government schools, basically. Because
why though? Why do you want kids out of government schools?
Because like what Lance is talking about, completely devoid of piety, completely devoid of virtue, that utilitarian. I think sometimes, especially in our area, like Bible Belt, like we think, oh, schools. I'm small town. My school's not that bad. Like my school's not. Dude, like I got my wife's from Washington State, and I saw one where they were doing like a literal public school in Bellingham, Washington, was doing like a drag show in their gym, like for kids at a school. It's insane. And you're like, well, I don't have that going on here in Springdale or Bentonville. So like, what's the problem? Yeah. But I think that I'll tell you what. One of the things I always talk about is with public school is just knowing it, man. Like culture's going to get made no matter what. And in a public school, teachers don't care about making the culture. And so who's making the culture of the school? The kids are making the culture of the school, like the underground. Now, what kind of culture is that going to be? One built on Snapchat and sending photos and sexual morality and drug use and partying, or is it going to be something else?
Well, very much a secular worldview. Like when people ask me that, I'm obviously those things, trannies and all this stuff, but it's what they're not teaching the students. They're not teaching them the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
They're not teaching them that God is creator and we are to submit and worship Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. They're not teaching them to honor their father and mother.
Well, that's a moral crisis because like you're nothing. You're evolutionary soup. So what's the point of anything? You know what I mean? And then social media just reinforces that. But that's a whole other thing. So anyway, like obviously we don't want kids at public school, but homeschool's like good. Like I value that too. I mean, if you don't have a Christian education, like it's like you're not going to send them to government school, so that's what you're going to do. But like, understand that it's still a good option, like because it's Christian in the home. You're taking responsibility like the Lord's given you. Because I think a lot of people look at any kind of Christian school and they think, well, I'm then relinquishing my responsibility as a parent. I'm supposed to be the one.
Ephesians 6.
But it's like you're not at the schools like partnering with the family and stuff like that. But what benefits might there be to a classical Christian school versus just traditional homeschooling? Like what potential benefits might there be that you would get out of one versus the other?
I think I'd like to start answering that with an anecdote. I have a friend who, when he was 8 years old, two things happened in his life. First of all, his father apprenticed him to an oil painter, a portrait painter. Second thing was he began to pay him $25 to read a book that the dad chose. His father handed him, I think the first book when he was 8 was a pretty substantial book on economics. Being a brick and mortar school, 4 days a week, there is an opportunity there to have your children taught by someone with expertise in an area. When you want your child to learn gymnastics, you send them to a gymnastics teacher. When you want your child to learn piano, you have a piano teacher. I think the division of labor, especially as students get older, it becomes, unless you've done an absolute tremendous job in preparing them to educate themselves in the high school, when you get into higher level classes, I think the advantage of having someone with expertise in that area to guide those students is tremendous. Also, I think that the challenge of having to perform well in community when you are in a classroom, having to stand up and make a speech in front of your peers, living within that community, growing within that community, I think that is an advantage as well. Other things are they're just, as our school grows and we add things, there will be more and more opportunities within the context of that community to take part in.
Like baseball.
Very sports like
Hopefully
baseball.
Like baseball.
Hopefully
man.
baseball.
We're going to get it going.
Rugby, fencing, wrestling, those kind of things, I think those are some of the advantages that a brick and mortar school has over homeschooling. Yeah.
Well, I think like too, when I think about it, and you kind of mentioned it, I just know even from my own experience with, I think just the intentional time, like the intentional time set aside for the student to learn, like for Owen to learn. So when he comes home, he can just play.
Right.
It's not like, okay, we need to get this done, but we also need to go run this errand. And also I want to take the other kids to the park and do stuff. I think just having like that clear cut time of this is learning time, that's structure. I mean, and that's kind of me. I mean, I'm a very structured person. And so I like that aspect, intentionality. I also think there's just that aspect of, man, like, when you get multiple kids, like I've seen this in my own family discipleship, like with Bible memory verses. Owen had, he was like, we do the Truth and Grace memory books from Founders Ministry.
Yeah, we do that to school.
And so Owen had, like, as a 3 or 4 year old, like 5 and 6 year old verses memorized, because why? I'm focused on him. We're doing it. And Knox is like way behind because you got 4 of them. So now you're trying to do it 4 different things, 4 different verses, and also find the time to do it on top of like the time of like getting ready for bedtime and all that stuff. I mean, I think just it just practically just gets a little bit difficult, I think, the more and more. And I think too, like one of the things that, me and Jessica before school, we were like, okay, what would we do? Homeschool, Christian school, what does that look like? And I'm not against homeschooling at all. I know Jessica could do it and set her mind to it. But part of my reasoning for like preferring a school was I need Owen, like I have 4 sons, and I need my sons to be able to stand up on their own out in the world. Like you were kind of talking about with the peers. Like you need to have these cases where you can be embarrassed if you don't perform, right? Because he's not going to be embarrassed if he doesn't perform with Knox. It's like, shucks, whatever. Right. But like being able to stand up on his own, interact with people on his own, have relationships on his own that are not without oversight. I mean, you talked about that dealing with sin at school, obviously with parents, like, but you want him to be able to figure out how to navigate the world as a man instead of being basically like a bird kept in the nest until, okay, it's time to go get married. Now we're going to kick you out the nest. And they don't really know how to fly yet. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm not saying you can't do that at home, but like it's a both and. It's kind of everything. The school, I think, just gives him an opportunity to learn that thing and to grow into the man he's going to be. Yeah. I mean, because those formative years of figuring out who am I in relation to other people. I mean, like, you know, I always joke that even in public school, like bullying is obviously sinful, but like bullying wasn't so bad because it kind of kept at bay all the crazies we see now. Because why? You had to conform to some sort of social norms. You had to be a normal person and conform to those social norms, or else you're going to be ridiculed as an outcast. Like, you need to be able to be out in the world to be able to conform to social norms and be a fully functioning human being that can interact with other people.
Yeah.
When you go to a store.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I appreciate y'all's thoughts on that. For our experience, I've really appreciated, like when I tell the kids, like, this is your work. Like, we're training you right now. Your education right now is your work. So you're waking up every morning. You got to get good night's rest. You wake up, make sure your homework is done, and you need to go and perform now. You got to work hard, and we get there usually 7:45, 7:50, depending on the night before.
Sure.
Start the day off with singing the Lord's Prayer with their peers, and then they're off, you know. And it teaches them, I think, the structure, the discipline. That you're going to go out into the world and you've got to be disciplined and you've got to work hard if you're going to be successful.
And I think that's the thing, like, because like I said, like all of us would say, like, government school, that's the issue. It's not homeschool versus classical Christian education. Like, obviously you can teach, and I know you'd say it too, like, you can teach your children to work in a homeschool environment. Like, there's chores to do, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
I think like what's being said is just that the school is just an opportunity for external pressure, like an additional external pressure valve that can kind of test those things, and it's an opportunity for that. And it's not the definitive only end all be all of that.
Yep.
But so, Lance, I guess, like, if we're starting to wrap up here, so if I was saying, if I came to you and I said, hey, I know nothing, I have a 4-year-old or whatever, and I know I want a Christian education of some kind, doing something. Why should I do classical Christian education?
I would say that the focus on piety, the focus on helping the entire child to grow in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, both in his body, in his mind, in his intellect, and in his affections and sensibilities, which are affected by the prayers that we say and the time that we spend together in singing and doing those types of things. I would say to choose a classical Christian education would be of such great benefit for your child because, as someone we all know says, there is no such thing as neutrality. And the point earlier about the government schools operating from a stance as if neutrality is real, that facts can be separated out of reality and then covered with whatever value system you'd like to cover them with. If God has created all things, if he is holding all things together right now, if the power of his word that was spoken on the first day is still reverberating down through creation even now and sustaining us through that same word, then why would you not want your child to be in a system, in a presence that acknowledges that and is pointing them to that all the time?
Yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah, so here's what I've gotten out of it. So here's like my summary. If I'm going to try to summarize it and help think somebody through it, is it, and you tell me if I'm wrong. So what I've gotten out of classical Christian education and like what it is number one, it's this God permeating all things, philosophy, foundation, whatever you want to call it, that God is in everything. And so God is a foundation, and the benefit is you're producing basically thinkers, you're producing worshipers, because based on what they're learning, and you're also producing essentially Renaissance men and women that can take the best of what our civilization has done so far and bring it to bear. Is that like a pretty accurate summary of what as classical education is and like what fruit it would have?
That's a good representation of our goals. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Equipping students, reshaping culture, all to the glory of God.
Right.
That's right. That's good.
Right.
All right. We're going to land it there?
Yeah.
Well, Lance, we appreciate you.
Yes,
Well,
thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
I'll tell you. I mean, I know I've said it before. We're just really, really appreciative of the whole school thing. That feels like it's kind of been like a Lord deal, dropping it in our laps of how it happened with the debt-free building, and then you coming along and all that stuff. And man, I know I just couldn't be more grateful, because I know that I know school and education it's a ministry of the way you're doing it. Right. And I think Jesus talking about like leaving fatherlands, and not being repaid, you'll be repaid in the end. Like, I think that what you're doing really is serving the kingdom, and I'm very, very grateful for it.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I echo that. Absolutely, brother. If you are interested in learning more about Wisdom and Truth Classical Academy here in Bentonville, Arkansas, you can visit our website at wisdomatca.org, and we have a contact portion on the website where you can reach out, and we would love to hear from you. Well, we pray that this episode about classical Christian education has been a blessing to you. Until next time, this is Everyday Discipleship.